snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.
Hi guys, so I am here today to talk about 3 books that are not out yet but will be out super soon and my thoughts on them. And I was sent all of these for review, so I didn't buy any of them. Unfortunately, I didn't love all of these. I think they all have interesting points to them and they all have slight bad points to them. So I'm going to talk about all of them and then you guys can let me know down below if you're still interested in buying them. I'm sure that many of you will have a different opinion to me. First one I'm going to talk about is Replica, which is by Lauren Oliver. This is a book told from 2 points of view. You have Lyra, and then if you flip over the book, you have Gemma. And basically in this story you are following whichever one you want, and you can do it so that you read the whole of Gemma's story and then the whole of Lyra's, or the other way round. Or you can do it so that you read 1 chapter from Gemma's, 1 chapter from Lyra, 1 chapter from Gemma, 1 chapter from Lyra. You can do it either way, whichever one works for you. I think I started with Gemma's section, and I actually read this one with Eleanor, so it was a buddy read between the two of us. Unfortunately, I didn't like this story, and I think the main reason I didn't like it that much is because it's very fast-paced, and I don't feel like it developed to the point I wanted it to develop to. It's an interesting idea. We're following Gemma, who is quite happy in her family, but has constantly been going in and out of hospital for various health reasons over the course of her life, and she is being bullied at school. She's not in a happy situation. And then we're also, if you flip to the other side, following Lyra, who is inside this institute. She all her life has been told that she doesn't have a family, she's just a clone who's been made. So we have these 2 extremes, one in a happy family life, the other in an institution where she's being tested and all sorts of dramatic, crazy things are happening to her. And I started with Gemma, who was the one in the family. I definitely feel like this had really interesting potential at times, but I could tell quite quickly on that this wasn't going to be a book I'd enjoy. Not because it was a bad book overall, but I just knew I wasn't going to enjoy this, because for me it felt very like a YA read, and it wasn't a YA read that I would have normally picked up. I didn't request it, and I think maybe that's just the problem. I think if you do read a lot of YA books, you're probably going to really enjoy this one, particularly if you like the sound of people who have to go through very dramatic situations, a story where a girl runs away from home because she wants to do something for herself for the first time in her life, and a story where a girl is trying desperately to escape a situation which is pretty horrible and nasty, and she does not want to be there anymore. If any of those things appeal to you, then you may really enjoy this story. I think maybe this is aimed at someone a lot younger than me and someone who hasn't read as much YA as I have, so it wouldn't have been as predictable. Unfortunately, this one just wasn't for me. It was decent, it was okay, but it wasn't anything for me. It just wasn't the right audience. I wasn't the right audience for this book. The next one I have to show you guys is Poison City, and again, I think this one is a really interesting story and has a lot of potential. This one is actually a debut. It's by Paul Crilly and it's his debut book. And this one says, Gideon Tell fights demons, but he's no good guy. He has a wand, but don't you dare call him Harry Potter. He has a talking dog for a spirit guide, but he's a mean drunk and he sure as hell ain't nobody's friend. So of course that captivated me instantly, and I was like, what is this book? It sounds insanely awesome. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite Harry Potter. It was a lot more Ben Aronovich. I would say if you like the Rivers of London series by him, you're probably going to really like this, or sort of any urban crime fantasy series, you'll probably like this. I don't read a whole bunch of urban crime fantasy. I've read a couple in the past. I've read like Jim Butcher and Ben Aronovich, so they're my only real comparisons for this book. I think if you like those, you're going to like this one. I really enjoyed the inclusion of various different crazy supernatural creatures in this. I thought that was really funny, and we constantly had our main character rushing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and basically battling all sorts of absolutely insane situations because he works for this magical society who hunt down and keep all of the magical creatures and supernatural creatures in line. When this starts, we are actually following him and his boss as they go to investigate a case, and then a few days later his boss actually ends up dead, and he knows that it's something to do with the case that he's been investigating. So together, he and his pet dog, who talks and is basically like a spirit animal for him, they have to find out how on earth this all happened and what's going on, and figure out all of the clues to get to the end of the story. So I think this one is actually the start in a series from the impression I get, and I definitely think it's a series that could get better as it goes. I think the debut just suffered a little from being a debut, and it wasn't my favourite story because it was urban fantasy, not because it's bad. I think for urban fantasy it was very enjoyable, but I just don't read a lot of urban fantasy. So again, it's a case of me maybe not being the target audience for this book, but this one did interest me a lot more than Replica. So I would love to hear what you guys think of this, because I reckon a lot of you guys will still be really interested in this. It's just, if you don't read urban fantasy, you probably won't. But if you do, which I'm sure many of you do, you might want to check this one out when it comes out. And the final one that I have to talk to you guys about is Smoke, which is by Dan Valletta, and this one I was also sent for review. I wanted to love this, but I was a little skeptical going into this book because it is compared on the back to His Dark Materials and Harry Potter, which I'm gonna say right now is a huge comparison to compare anything to. That's 2 out of these 3 books being compared to Harry Potter. That's a high thing for you to try and aim for. I mean, it's like everyone's childhood on BookTube, so it's quite a lot to aim for. This was an interesting story. This one, the ideas really captivated me, and I didn't know that this is actually also the start in a series. I think this one, out of the 3 I've shown you, is the one that I would continue the series with, because I think this one had a lot more potential in my eyes than the other 2, and it felt as though this one really could go somewhere. We're following 2 characters called Thomas and Charlie, and we follow them as they are in this boarding school in Oxford, where it's very harsh, it's very strict, and they're living in this world where sin appears as smoke. So anyone who tells a lie, or anyone who does something with sinful intentions, they basically have dark substance that kind of comes out of their body. It's almost like sweating soot. That's basically what it is, like sweating out smoke. Every time that you get anxious because you know you're doing something wrong, every time you tell a lie, every time you do something that you shouldn't do, you shouldn't be doing. I really enjoyed that concept. I thought that concept was really, really interesting. The thing I didn't love as much about this story is the characters. I feel like the characters in this story needed a lot more work to get them to a level where they were interesting enough to hold my attention the whole way through and keep me wanting to read. I really enjoyed the plot. I really liked the plot. I liked the world building. I think the magic system was all very interesting. It's just the characters that slightly drew this one down for me. But generally, I did enjoy this one. One thing I would say about this is it kind of took a little bit of a turn in the end. The first half, I think I enjoyed more than the second half, because the first half is largely to do with finding out about the smoke. We as the reader don't know where it comes from or what makes it, so we're getting more and more clues as to what it might be. And we're also following these 2 young children as they start growing up and realising the things that are wrong with the world. One of them has to go to his family house because of all sorts of tensions that have been arising at the school. He thinks there's a mystery going on, which there is, and he definitely doesn't trust all his teachers. There's a lot more going on there. He also ends up at this family home with this family that he barely really knows, and he doesn't really have a clue what he's doing there. He just kind of gets mixed up in all the trouble that this family have going on. And then the second half strikes, and the second half is a lot more about this family and getting away from them and trying to do experiments to do with smoke. So it's all interesting stuff. I think it kind of jumped from one point to the next quite quickly, which was good because it kept me interested and it kept me excited. Just wish the characters had been that a little bit better, because I think the characters feel quite naive and quite young, and I wish that they felt a little bit more like teenagers or even early 20s. That would have been great, because then I could have connected a lot more and I could have really got invested in the story, and I think it would have given this kind of tone of a little bit more development, a little bit more maturity to the whole story, because I think the plot and the magic was quite mature and I think it was nicely done. I just feel like the characters let this one down a little bit. I think that this is the author's first sort of foray into adult fiction. I think he's done a lot of YA in the past, and this definitely feels more like a YA read than an adult fiction. Probably one I will continue with, because I think I do want to know what's happening next, particularly with the ending being quite a dramatic one. So those are the 3 books I have to show you today. I didn't hate any of them, but I definitely had my issues with all 3 of them. And I think it's largely to do with getting the audience right, and I don't think I was the right audience for these 2 particularly. I do think I might have been the right audience for this one, but I just wish the writing had been that little bit higher quality-wise, and I would have liked to see the characters with a lot more development. I reckon if we'd had another 100 pages and a lot more development on the characters, that could have been a really fantastic book. This one I just don't think was for me, and this one I think is a great urban fantasy, but isn't necessarily what I read that much. So those are my reviews on these 3 books. I'd love to hear what you guys think of them down below. If any of those appeal to you, I'm sure many of them will. Leave me your comments down below about which ones you might end up picking up when they come out. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.